The story begins in the autumn of 1940. Europe is already engulfed in flames. Nations are tightening their belts, rationing supplies, and preparing for a conflict far larger than anyone imagined. Armies are swelling with young men who, only a year earlier, were farmers, apprentices, clerks, and students. Now they march with rifles on their shoulders, wearing freshly stitched uniforms that symbolize duty, fear, and fate. This is where our story starts, not on the battlefield, but in a narrow, sunlit workshop tucked between the aging buildings of a small industrial town in Britain. The clatter of sewing machines echoes rhythmically, and the smell of cotton, wool, and machine oil fills the air. Women work swiftly, shoulders tense, each stitch measured and precise. Among them is Eliza Harrow, a 24-year-old seamstress with steady hands and observant eyes. She has been sewing military uniforms for months, working long hours to meet the endless demand. Her fingers bear small calluses, and the tips carry faint scars from needles pushed too far during hurried nights. Yet she never complains. In her mind, every uniform she sews is more than a piece of fabric. It is a shield, a companion, a silent witness for a soldier she will never meet. But one morning, as she inspects a fresh shipment of rough wool panels, Eliza's attention drifts to a name written on a transport list attached to a bundle of uniform tunics. Private Thomas Hale, 3rd Infantry Regiment. Something about that name lingers. Not because she knows him, but because it feels grounded. Solid. Human. While thousands of uniforms pass through her hands, this is the first time she pauses to whisper the name softly, almost like a prayer. That evening, as the factory lamps dim and workers gather their things, Eliza stays behind. She runs her hand across the tunic assigned to Private Hale. The fabric is coarse, stiff from its newness. She lifts it to the light, examining seams she will soon secure. And then something unexpected happens. She feels a pull, emotional, delicate, irrational yet undeniable. A thought forms in her mind, quiet but persistent. These men go to war with no comfort. No softness. What if I could give one of them something small? Something human? She hesitates. The rules are strict. No personalization. No messages. No markings. Uniforms must be uniform. Identical. Anonymous. But compassion has a way of slipping through the cracks of wartime discipline. Eliza returns to her workbench. She tears a small piece of writing paper from her notebook. Her pencil trembles slightly as she writes her first sentence. To the soldier who wears this uniform. I pray it brings you home. She stares at the words, heart pounding. She signs only with an initial, E. Then, when no one is watching, she folds the note into a tiny square and tucks it carefully into the inner seam of the tunic's collar. Just a few discreet stitches. Invisible from the outside. Hidden from inspectors. A secret message inside a soldier's armor. 2 days later, the uniforms are packed into crates and sent off to supply depots. Eliza finishes her shift exhausted but smiling faintly, unsure whether her message will ever be found, unsure whether it was foolish, or brave, or both. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Private Thomas Hale prepares to deploy. He is 21, with an earnest face and a calm nature. He volunteered for service the moment Britain announced mobilization, leaving behind his mother and his younger brother who still struggles to understand why. Thomas is not fearless. In fact, fear gnaws at him constantly, fear of the unknown, fear of failing, fear of not returning. But he carries himself with quiet resolve, determined to protect others even if he cannot protect himself. When he is issued his new uniform, he barely looks at it. To him, it's another reminder of reality. He is a soldier now, bound for France. But that night, as he prepares his pack, something unusual happens. He scratches at the collar, feeling a stiff spot. Curious, he examines it more closely. His fingers find a tiny distortion in the seam, just enough to detect something thin tucked inside. Carefully, he slices a single thread with his pocket knife. A folded note slips into his hand. Thomas freezes. He unfolds the paper slowly, heart thudding. To the soldier who wears this uniform. I pray it brings you home. He reads it twice. 3 times. A smile forms, small, hesitant, but genuine. He whispers, almost embarrassed to hear his own voice. Who are you? He? For the first time since his enlistment, the weight on his chest lightens. The fear loosens its grip. The world feels less hostile, less empty. He folds the note and tucks it into the inner pocket of his pack. He will carry it with him everywhere. Whether he realizes it or not, a thread has been sewn between 2 strangers. Back in the workshop, Eliza tries to dismiss the memory of what she did. It was only 1 letter. A moment of weakness, she tells herself. She must not repeat it. But then a supply officer announces the next quota, 200 uniforms needed within a week, all for regiments preparing to cross the channel. Eliza looks at the stacks of fabric, the piles of untouched tunics. Each one belongs to a man walking toward danger. And the thought hits her again, sharper this time. They deserve some piece of kindness. Eliza waits until the other seamstresses leave. She writes another note. Then another. And another. Some short and hopeful. Stay safe. Stay brave. Some heartfelt. Someone is praying for your return. Some almost poetic. May these threads guard your life like a friend. She hides each one in seams, pockets, linings. A hidden network of human warmth. Unseen, but deeply felt. She doesn't know if the soldiers will ever read them. But she hopes they do. And one soldier, Thomas Hale, hopes he will find another someday. Because the small note he discovered gave him something more potent than military rations, more sustaining than sleep, more precious than certainty. It gave him hope. A hope sewn quietly into the fabric of war. Letters across a war. As winter deepens in 1940, the British Army prepares to send thousands of men across the Channel. Among the regiments is the 3rd Infantry, where Private Thomas Hale trains daily under cold skies and constant tension. Thomas keeps the hidden note tucked inside his breast pocket, a secret he refuses to reveal even to his closest bunkmates. When morale collapses, when fear creeps in during quiet nights, he unfolds the tiny square of paper, smooths its creases, and reads the same simple line again. I pray this uniform brings you home. He doesn't know her name. He doesn't know her face. But he imagines a warm voice, gentle hands, and eyes that hold kindness even in difficult times. On the day of deployment, as soldiers march toward the transport vehicles, Thomas touches the note inside his pocket and whispers, "Thank you, whoever you are." Meanwhile, back in Britain, Eliza Harrow's routine becomes a rhythm of stitching, folding, and writing small secret letters late at night. She never signs her full name, only E. The secrecy protects her job and gives her courage. But one morning, her supervisor announces a new rule: all uniforms will now undergo double inspection due to recent manufacturing errors in other factories. This complicates everything. Eliza feels her heartbeat quicken. She cannot risk being caught. A single letter discovered inside a seam could cost her employment, or worse, be seen as sabotage. But as she looks across the workshop at the rows of uniforms destined for men whose futures hang by a thread, her resolve hardens. She begins sewing the messages into hidden inner folds, far beneath decorative stitching, impossible to detect unless someone searches intentionally. The process takes longer, but she refuses to stop. It becomes her mission. Her quiet rebellion against the cruelty of war. Thomas in France. The 3rd Infantry Regiment is deployed to northern France. Snow-covered fields stretch endlessly, dotted with abandoned villages and scarred landscapes. The air carries the distant rumble of artillery, a constant reminder that the front lines are drawing closer. Thomas adapts quickly. He follows orders, maintains discipline, and learns survival skills faster than he expected. But one evening, while stationed in a damp barn near Arras, he sits with his squad, exhausted after a long patrol. As he adjusts his tunic, his fingers brush against something stiff inside the inner cuff. He freezes. No. It can't be. Heart racing, he bends the cuff closer to the dim lantern light. There, barely visible, a tiny row of loose stitches. Just like before. He carefully teases the thread open, revealing a small folded note. His breath trembles. To the man who wears this uniform. The world may feel cold, but you are not forgotten. He closes his eyes, overwhelmed. The barn is dark, the war is loud, but for a moment, he feels held. He feels understood. A strange comfort spreads across the regiment. Days pass. As Thomas moves from one outpost to another, soldiers speak in hushed tones about strange discoveries in their uniforms. One soldier finds a short poem. Another finds a blessing written in neat handwriting. Another finds a message tucked inside a trouser lining. The men start calling them the invisible letters. Some jokingly call the anonymous writer the angel seamstress. Others treat the messages like talismans. But none of them know that Thomas received not one but 2 notes, and that he carries both with him like cherished relics. Every time he reads them, he imagines the woman behind the words. He imagines her sewing late at night, her lamp glowing, her brow furrowed in concentration as she hides another message of comfort. He imagines her bravery. He imagines her humanity. And slowly, without realizing it, he begins writing something of his own. A letter. Addressed simply. To E, the seamstress who writes to soldiers. He pours his thoughts onto the page. Not personal details. Not declarations. Just gratitude, and hope, and reflections from the front lines. He tells her that her letters bring warmth to the cold and courage to the weary. He thanks her for seeing soldiers not as numbers, but as human beings. Then he folds the paper carefully. But he faces a problem. How do you send a letter to a woman whose identity you don't know, in a factory you cannot locate, tucked inside a seam you cannot reach? For days, he wanders. For days, he carries the letter folded in his pack, unsure of its fate. Until one afternoon, after a muddy supply run, he notices a large shipment of new uniforms arriving at their temporary base. He sees an opportunity. A small one, but enough. With trembling fingers, Thomas slips his folded letter into the inside pocket of a tunic still bound in twine. He tucks it deep into the inner lining. Then he ties the knot tightly again, hoping the message will survive the journey. He whispers, "Find her. Please." The message that travels backward. Weeks later, as the uniforms are shipped back for repairs and redistribution, Eliza returns from lunch to find a new stack of tunics waiting on her table. She sighs and starts her routine inspection. The first tunic, torn sleeve. The second, missing button. The third, heavy mud stains along the cuffs. Then, on the fourth tunic, she notices a small irregularity inside the pocket. A tiny bulge beneath the inner stitch. Her breath catches. No soldier would hide something in a damaged uniform being sent for repair, unless it was meant to be found. With shaking hands, she opens the seam. Out slides a folded note. She sits back, stunned. Her hands tremble as she unfolds it. Her eyes scan the first line. To E, the seamstress who writes to soldiers. She clamps a hand over her mouth. Her heart thunders. Someone received her message. Someone cared enough to write back. She reads every word slowly, reverently, as if holding something fragile and precious. Thomas's gratitude. His quiet courage. His reflections of fear and resilience. His admission that her words brought him hope. Eliza's throat tightens. She reads the letter 3 more times. She places it against her chest, eyes closed. For months she has been giving hope to strangers. Now, for the first time, hope has been given back to her. She whispers softly. Thomas Hale. I found your letter. A connection begins to grow. That night, Eliza writes a reply. A longer one this time. Not hidden in a seam. Not folded into a tiny square. But a full page, written with deliberate care. She tells Thomas she is only a seamstress from a small town. She tells him she never expected her notes to matter. She tells him she prays for every soldier who wears the uniform she makes. And then she adds something personal, something she has never shared. I do not know your face, but I know your courage. And if my words bring you even a small measure of comfort, then I will keep writing, for as long as you need. She signs it simply. Eliza. This time, she writes her full name. Then she hides the letter inside a newly stitched tunic, trusting fate to carry it forward. Somewhere in France, Thomas Hale awaits his next deployment. And somewhere in Britain, Eliza Harrow waits to see if her message survives the journey. 2 strangers bound by fabric, ink, and war. 2 hearts connected by threads stronger than anyone could have predicted. Threads in the fire. Spring, 1941. Northern France feels less like a place and more like a trembling heartbeat. Battles intensify. Artillery shakes the ground daily. And soldiers learn to live with uncertainty, the kind that presses into their bones. Among them, Private Thomas Hale stands guard near a bomb-scarred village, clutching a hope he tries not to admit aloud. Maybe Eliza wrote back. Maybe her letter found him. But supply shipments take weeks. And repaired uniforms return slowly from British factories. Thomas checks every new crate, every folded tunic, every stack of freshly pressed trousers, always searching for a sign. Yet nothing comes. At least, not yet. A silent front and a loud heart. Every night, Thomas takes out the 2 original notes she wrote, the first one sewn behind a pocket seam, the second hidden in a sleeve cuff. He reads them under dim lantern light, letting the words anchor him. Meanwhile, the regiment prepares for another push toward the front line. Rumors spread, German forces are rotating in larger numbers. Patrols have become more dangerous. On a windy evening, Thomas and his squad are sent to secure a farmstead. Bullet holes lace the wooden beams. Smoke trails rise from distant shell impacts. As they search the grounds, Thomas's arm brushes against the hanging coat. He notices something. A tunic. Brand new. Hardly worn. It lies draped over the back of a broken chair, delivered from a recent supply drop. With a breath that trembles, Thomas lifts the tunic and checks the inside lining. There, a tiny irregular stitch. His pulse spikes. Hands shaking, he opens it carefully. A folded letter falls into his palm. His throat tightens. His vision blurs for a second. He unfolds the paper slowly. Eliza's letter finds its way. Thomas Hale. He stops reading. She wrote his name. She knows him now. Not just the nameless soldier wearing a uniform she stitched. He reads on. I cannot explain how much your letter meant. I did not expect anyone to find my words. much less send something back. But I'm grateful. Truly. Thomas leans against the wall, closing his eyes as her words wash over him like sunlight in winter. I do not know what you face out there. But if you are reading this, then at least one part of the war has not taken you from us. He reads every line twice. She tells him about the factory. About long nights and cold winters. About her fear that one day a supervisor will catch her, and the strength she finds in imagining soldiers discovering her hidden messages. And at the end, her signature. Eliza Harrow. Her full name. Her real name. Thomas whispers it. Softly. Like something precious. Eliza. Then he presses the paper to his chest. A connection strengthens. From that day forward, Thomas writes back whenever he can. He hides his letters the same way she hides hers, inside seams, behind inner stitching, beneath hidden folds. He writes about the cold mornings on the front, the friends he fights beside, the villages reduced to rubble, the moments of silence that feel heavier than gunfire. But he also writes about hope and gratitude, and how her words travel farther than she imagines. He signs his letters simply, Thomas. And every few weeks, when uniforms return from repairs or supply crates arrive, he searches through the stacks again. Most days, he finds nothing. But sometimes, he finds more. Eliza's days grow heavier. Back in Britain, Eliza's letters become the rhythm of her nights. The factory buzzes daily, sewing machines chattering like metal insects. Supervisors hurry from table to table inspecting stitches, counting supplies, shouting updates. But the only thing Eliza hears is the beating of her own heart every time she slides her hand into a tunic's inner fold, praying there might be another hidden note waiting for her. Some days she finds nothing, and doubt creeps in. Maybe he's gone. Maybe the front has moved. Maybe uniforms delivered to France aren't reaching his unit anymore. But then, a new batch arrives. And inside one uniform meant for officers, she feels a small rigid shape beneath the lining. Her breath catches. She cuts the stitching open. Inside is a folded paper, dirt-stained but intact. Thomas's handwriting. She reads it with trembling hands. Your letters give me something to survive for. Her eyes burn. She reads on. Every time artillery shakes the air. Every time the night seems endless. I put my hand over the pocket where your note rests. And remind myself that hope still exists. You give that hope to me. Eliza presses her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. In a world collapsing into violence, two people who have never met, two lives separated by countries and chaos, are holding onto each other through thin lines of ink and thread. Something more than hope. Weeks pass. Dozens of letters travel back and forth, each hidden carefully, traveling silently through supply chains and repair stations. Each one carrying emotion neither of them dares to name. But everyone around Thomas notices a change. He smiles more. He stands taller. He fights harder, not recklessly, but purposefully. One evening, while sitting around a fire with his squad, a fellow soldier nudges him. Tom, mate, you've been different lately. Something good happen? Thomas hesitates. Then he looks down at the corner of Eliza's latest letter peeking from his pocket. He smiles softly. Yeah, he says. Something good. The war moves, and so do the letters. But war does not pause for love or hope. German forces push forward. Tactical retreats begin. British command orders reorganizations. As Thomas's regiment prepares to relocate deeper into southern France, he feels fear for the first time in weeks, not for himself, but for the fragile connection he has built with Eliza. What if their supply route changes? What if uniforms stop coming for repairs? What if the chain that carried their messages collapses? Before leaving the village, he writes one more letter, the longest one yet. Inside, he tells her, "If my letters stop reaching you, know that I tried. Know that I read every word you wrote. And they carried me farther than any rations or orders ever could. And know that if I live through this war, I will find you." He folds the letter, slides it into a newly delivered tunic, and prays it reaches her. Then he marches south with his regiment, Eliza's latest letter close to his heart. A letter that nearly never arrives. 2 weeks later, in the uniform factory, Eliza sorts through a series of garments that were delayed in shipping. Mud-stained. Torn. Some half-burned. She sighs. These are the uniforms that rarely carry anything inside. These are the ones too damaged to hide messages. But on the 6th tunic, on one with fraying seams and a scorched shoulder, she feels a small bulge deep inside the inner lining. Her hands begin to shake. She cuts the thread. A folded paper slips out. Her breath stops. She unfolds it slowly. When she reads the first line, she drops into her chair. "If my letters stop reaching you." Her throat tightens. The letter is full of warmth, full of fear, full of hope, and full of something else she never expected. A promise. "If I survive this war, I will find you." Eliza presses the paper to her heart. Outside, rain patters softly on the factory windows. Inside, one seamstress and one soldier are now bound not just by uniforms, but by a vow suspended between worlds. Stitched into forever. Summer drags itself across Europe like a wounded animal. 1942 bleeds into 1943. Front lines shift. Armies advance and retreat like tides made of steel. And through it all, one thread holds together two lives who have never met. A soldier in France. And a seamstress in Britain. Their words travel through darkness and danger, hidden in folds of cloth, carried by hands that will never know what they're transporting. But war is a ruthless thief. And even the strongest threads can be strained. A letter gone missing. Weeks pass. Then months. And suddenly, no more letters. Eliza checks every seam, every fold, every shipment. Nothing. Not a single note from Thomas. She keeps working, but the silence clawing at her chest grows heavier. Every time she picks up a tunic and feels nothing inside, her breath trembles. At night, she lies awake, staring at her ceiling, wondering. Did something happen? Did he fall? Did he move to another front? Did my last letter reach him at all? Sometimes she even wonders if maybe, just maybe, he stopped writing. But she shakes that thought away. She knows his handwriting too well now. Knows the way he presses slightly harder on certain letters. Knows the warmth that almost seems to rise from the page. Yet the silence continues. And she begins to fear the truth she does not want to say aloud. He might be gone. On the other side of the war. While Eliza struggles with uncertainty, Thomas is fighting for his life. His regiment has been pushed across villages torn apart by artillery. Air raids scream overhead. Supplies run thin. And in one brutal encounter, Thomas is injured. A collapsed wall. A flash of stone and dust. Darkness. He wakes in a field hospital, bandaged, disoriented, barely remembering how he arrived there. His belongings are gone. His uniform destroyed. And the letter Eliza wrote, the one he kept closest to his heart, is lost in the rubble of a fallen farmhouse. For days, he can barely move. For weeks, he is unable to write. Even when he finally tries, His hands shake so badly that the pencil shatters under pressure. But more than his injuries, something else torments him. He cannot reach her. They have moved him far from the front. The supply routes have changed. Uniform repairs are handled by a different region now. His letters have nowhere to go. The chain that once connected them has collapsed without warning. And Thomas feels it like a physical wound. A thread that refuses to break. Months later, as he recovers enough to stand, his squad prepares for redeployment. But this time, he refuses to leave without trying one last time. He takes a small scrap of uniform cloth, nearly all that remains of his old tunic, and writes on it carefully. "I'm alive. I'm trying to get back to the front. I don't know if this will reach you. But I promised I would find you, and I will." He knows it's unlikely to reach her. He knows the route is broken. Still, he gives the scrap to a supply officer returning to Britain. "A long shot," the officer mutters. But long shots sometimes work in war. Thomas watches him leave, clutching hope with bruised fingers. Eliza waits. And waits. Back in Britain, the days stretch endlessly. Eliza continues stitching uniforms, but the spark is gone. Her co-workers notice. "You look pale," one says. "Tired," says another. "Are you all right?" She nods. It's easier than explaining the truth. How do you tell someone that your heart is tied to a soldier you've never met? How do you explain that his silence feels louder than bombs? One night, she goes home, sits on her bed, and opens every letter he ever sent. She lays them out like fragile memories. The first one, surprised, confused, grateful. The ones describing battles. The ones full of fear. The ones full of hope. The last one, containing a promise. "If I survive this war, I will find you." Her fingers tremble over the ink. She whispers into the quiet room. "Please be alive, Thomas. Please." The letter that changes everything. Then, one chilly morning, she receives a small parcel. A supply officer delivers it himself. "Came from France," he says. "Long way." Miracles happen sometimes. She nearly drops it. Her hands shake violently as she opens it. Inside is a torn piece of uniform cloth. And on it, Thomas's handwriting. Rough. Uneven. Barely legible. But unmistakably his. "I'm alive." She clutches it to her chest and sobs. Not from grief, but from relief so powerful it knocks the breath out of her. He's alive. He's alive. And he's coming back. The end of war. By early 1945, everything changes. Allied forces push forward. The German army collapses. And the war approaches its end. Thomas is finally discharged, limping but alive, carrying only a small rucksack, and the hope he's held for years. He boards a transport ship to Britain. The sea wind stings his face, but his eyes are bright with determination. With every wave that slams against the hull, one thought repeats in his mind. Find Eliza. The meeting. He arrives in London, exhausted but restless. Crowds surround him, soldiers reuniting with families, nurses cheering, civilians crying with relief. But he searches for only one person. He clutches the uniform scrap she once stitched, following the factory address printed faintly on the back. He walks for miles. Past rubble. Past celebrations. Past ruins. Finally, he reaches the building. Women pour out as their shift ends. He stands there, breathless, scanning each face. And then, a woman emerges, clutching a familiar scrap of cloth in her hand. Eliza. She stops. Her breath catches. Her eyes widen. He steps forward. "Are you," she whispers, voice trembling, "Thomas?" He nods, unable to speak. The world seems to fall silent. No bombs. No uniforms. No letters hidden in seams. Just two people, finally facing the reality their words stitched together long before they met. She walks toward him slowly. Then faster. Then finally runs into his arms. Thomas closes his eyes as he holds her, whispering into her hair. "I promised I'd find you." And she whispers back, through tears. "And I waited." Epilogue, stitched into memory. Years later, the couple grows old in a quiet home by the countryside. In a small glass box on their shelf rest the letters that survived the war. Notes sewn into seams. Words traded across battlefields. Promises carried through fire. Their grandchildren ask, "How did you two meet?" And Eliza always answers with a smile. "Because a soldier opened a seam and found my heart inside."